The flashing red and blue lights lit up the dark road as Officer Daniels stepped out of his patrol car. He had pulled over a black SUV for what seemed like a routine traffic stop. As he approached the driver's side, he was met with a calm but firm voice. The man inside wasn't just anyone. He was a U.S. Army general. But in that moment, Daniels didn't realize who he was dealing with. He asked for ID, his tone carrying an edge of authority. The general complied, handing over his credentials, his uniform still crisp from a long day of service. Then something shifted. As Daniel scanned the name on the ID, his face turned pale. His hands trembled slightly. He had just made a mistake, a massive one. And in the next few moments, his entire career and reputation would hang in the balance. What happened next shocked everyone. Officer Daniel's heart pounded as he looked from the ID to the man sitting in the driver's seat. Asterisk asterisk 4 stars asterisk asterisk, that wasn't just any soldier. This was a high-ranking U.S. Army general. Suddenly, the weight of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. How had he not noticed the uniform? The name on the ID was one he had heard before, but now, standing under the glare of his patrol car's headlights, it all became painfully clear. The general sat there, watching him carefully, his face unreadable. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He was just waiting. Daniel swallowed hard, his mind racing. Had he overstepped? Was this about to cost him everything? The radio crackled in the background, but Daniels barely heard it. Every move he had made up until now felt routine, until it wasn't. And the next few minutes would decide everything. Daniels took a slow breath, trying to steady his nerves. He knew he had to say something, but his throat felt dry. The general, still seated in the SUV, remained calm, his eyes locked on the officer. There was no anger, no frustration, just quiet patience, like a man who had seen this situation play out before. That made it worse. Daniel shifted his stance, glancing back at his patrol car. His partner was watching from inside, waiting for a signal. Should he call this in? No, he had already made one mistake, and he wasn't about to make another. His hands twitched slightly as he held the general's ID, his mind racing back to their brief exchange. He had been firm. Too firm? Did he assume too much? The general finally spoke, his voice steady. "Officer, is there a problem?" His words weren't aggressive, but they carried weight. Daniels hesitated. Was there, or had he just walked himself into the biggest mistake of his career? Daniels felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. The general's question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. His gut told him he had messed up, but there was no taking it back now. His grip tightened on the ID as he scrambled for the right words. "I just need to verify some information," he finally said, though even he wasn't sure what he was verifying anymore. The general gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Daniels glanced back at his partner again, but there was no help coming. This was on him. His radio crackled to life, dispatch asking for an update. His mouth felt dry as he reached for it, hesitating. He could feel the general watching him, waiting. Then, before he could speak, the general shifted slightly in his seat, reaching for something. Daniel's pulse skyrocketed. His hand hovered over his holster. Was this about to spiral out of control? Daniel's fingers twitched near his holster, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Every instinct told him to stay calm, but his training had taught him to expect the unexpected. The general moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into the center console. Daniel's breath caught. Then he pulled out a small black case and placed it on the dashboard. Daniel's eyes flicked between the case and the general's face, trying to make sense of what was happening. The general exhaled, his expression unreadable. "This is what you're looking for," he said evenly. Daniels hesitated, unsure if he should open it. Then, before he could react, a second vehicle pulled up behind them, its headlights cutting through the night. Another car, unmarked. Daniel's radio crackled again, this time with a different voice, one he didn't recognize. "Officer Daniels, stand by. Do not engage." His blood ran cold. Someone else was watching. And suddenly, it felt like he wasn't the one in control anymore. Daniel's pulse raced as the mysterious voice echoed through his radio. His grip tightened, but he forced himself to stay still. The general, still calm, tapped the black case on the dashboard. "Go ahead, open it," he said. Daniels hesitated, then slowly reached forward, his hand steady despite the chaos in his mind. He flipped the case open, and his stomach dropped. Inside was an official military badge, higher clearance than he had ever seen. This man wasn't just a general. He was someone with serious authority. Before Daniels could react, the door of the unmarked car swung open. A man in a suit stepped out, moving with purpose. "Stand down, Officer Daniels," he ordered. "This situation is beyond you." The realization hit him like a punch. This wasn't just a routine stop. He had stumbled into something much bigger. The general met Daniel's eyes, then gave a knowing nod. "You should always know who you're dealing with, officer," he said before stepping out of his vehicle. And just like that, Daniels realized he was the one being tested all along. Daniels felt the weight of the moment settle over him. His mind raced, piecing everything together. This wasn't about a traffic stop. It wasn't even about him making a mistake. It was something bigger, something he had no business being involved in. The general gave him one last look, almost like he understood. Then, without another word, he stepped into the unmarked car. The suited man followed, closing the door behind him. Seconds later, the vehicle disappeared into the night. Daniel stood there, gripping the ID in his hands, still trying to catch his breath. He had so many questions, but he knew he wouldn't get any answers. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Slowly, he walked back to his patrol car, his partner still watching him with confusion. Daniel sighed, staring out into the darkness. One thing was clear. He would never forget this night. And he would never make assumptions again.